With an area of 110 acres and a population of about 1,000 people, the Vatican is the smallest country in the world. And it is located inside Rome. However, the area covered by the country is not directly proportional to its authority and power over the world. The Vatican, the home of the papacy, is the administrative center of the Catholic Church, the oldest and largest continuously operating religious institution in the world. However, this mysterious country, which is home to many dark secrets and legends, is also the focus of attention of conspiracy theorists. Thousands of years of history lie beneath the paved streets of the Vatican, although experts suggest that only 5% of the city's underground has been fully explored. Excavations continue to reveal treasures that allow us to have a better understanding of the oldest parts of this culture. We'll take a look at the creepy things about it. Have a good day. The Vatican Necropolis. The fact that it houses a real city of the dead is one of the dark aspects of the most famous basilica in the world, the most famous in the world. This terrifying necropolis is located just below St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. At the same time, this place is considered the final resting place of St. Peter, one of the 12 apostles of Jesus, and above the ground there is a building full of beautiful works of art, fascinating frescoes and a world of wonders with a history of hundreds of years. However, the 5-story remaining hidden in the darkness of the underground is a ruin dating back to the first foundation of the Roman Empire, and the altar located in Basilica can be considered the peak point of all this history. The altar was built on 2,000-year-old bones, and most of the dead it hides under are not even Christian or Catholic. The oldest cemetery dates back to the 1st century BC and was used for pagans. Above this there is another cemetery dating from the 5th century. Although this cemetery dates from a period when pagans in Europe gradually converted to Catholicism, it is quite remarkable in terms of keeping the descendants of Christians together. In addition, there are not only leaders, high-ranking statesmen or nobles, but also ordinary citizens and slaves in this necropolis. This two-decker cemetery alone covers about 90% of the time when the Roman Empire was in power between 27 BC and 476 BC. There is also a secret church under this basilica, which has been built history after history, and even a newer church from the 12th century on top of it. We can safely say that St. Peter's Basilica is a relatively new addition built on a much older date. This place has served as a sacred space for a very long time, which is considered a much more famous cultural center today. The Vatican Obelisk. Vaticano Obelisci is an ancient monument located right in the center of St. Peter's Square. This monument dates back thousands of years, but actually belongs to Egypt. The obelisk was stolen from the Egyptian city of Heliopolis during the bloody reign of Caligula, one of the most notorious Roman emperors in history. But the history behind the obelisk is even darker than that. The Romans built a specially designed ship to transport the obelisk, and the structure was used for the execution of Christians after it was brought to Rome from Egypt. The columns were located in St. Peter's Circus at the time of the crucifixion. He would bring Christians under this structure and brutally execute them. After it was abandoned, the Vatican Hill became a necropolis, and in the Middle Ages it still stood in the same place, with Christians splattered with blood around its obese base. In 1586, the monument was finally moved from its original position and placed in the middle of the square. According to legend, at first a metal sphere with ashes was placed on the top of the obelisk. During the re-erection of the structure, it was opened to ashes and it was seen to be empty. It is currently on display at the Curie Capitol Museum. Today, they say that there are some relics of Jesus in the pilgrimage at the top of the structure. The Book of Karabakh, the Grand Grier More, is an old Karabakh book whose history dates back to 1421,521. However, no historian has agreed on when the first edition was published. Expert Davis suggested that the first edition was made available in 1702, but other scientists claimed that the book was written in the 19th century as a kind of hoax. As far as is known, the introductory part of the book was written by Antonio Veneziela della, and most of the information was taken from the original manuscripts of the magnificent King Solomon. Most of the black magic in the book is Solomon's key or variations of the red dragon, but the book generally mentions devil summoning ceremonies. So what does a book about the Black Elder have to do with the Vatican? According to rumors, an original copy is preserved somewhere in the Vatican archives. The accuracy of the claims is disputed, but this would not be too surprising considering that the Vatican archives are home to almost every religious text in the world. It seems perfectly reasonable that they should keep a book secret that can summon Lucifer and give someone the ability to make a deal with the devil. The death certificate of Jesus. The shroud is a piece of linen fabric that is thought to show the imprint of Jesus's face. Religious scholars believe that the shroud was wrapped around Jesus's body after his death, and therefore the imprint of his face appeared on the fabric. The shroud first appeared in 1354 and quickly became one of the most legendary religious artifacts in the world. The artifact has been kept inside the Royal Chapel at the Turin Cathedral in northern Italy since 1578. However, whether the shroud is real or not is still debated. Tests conducted in 1988 showed that the shroud dates back to the Middle Ages, that is, it appeared about 1,200 years after the date of Jesus's death. Latin Greek, but recently a researcher working in the Vatican Secret Archives Marmara Fraile said that there were some writings on the shroud that made it a kind of death certificate. Marmara stated that the words found on the cloth were written in Greek, Hebrew and Latin, and that this shroud showed that Jesus of Nazareth was covered over. These were information that came directly from someone who works at the Vatican. Now it is said that the priest's name was written on the cloth in several different languages, and then he was buried wrapped in a shroud. Or maybe the Vatican is just telling stories. What do you think about this issue? Escape tunnels. Passet Todi Borgo looks no different from the other stone walls in the Vatican from the outside. Starting from the city, 800 meters forward to the castle of San Angelo, most people still don't know what this long-standing structure is. This stone rampart was once a secret passage used to keep the popes out of harm's way. Although the tunnel, which looks like an ordinary wall from the outside, was started to be built by the order of Pope Nicholas III in 850 BC, it could not be completed for about 650 years until the reign of Alexander VI, which began in 1492. Pope Alexander VI was a pope who became famous for corruption and nepotism, using his office and money to take care of his illegitimate children. We can say that Alexander finished the tunnel just in time. Because in the year 1494, when Italy was invaded by the French, the Pope managed to escape by installing these tunnels. The last use of the tunnel took place in 1527, when Pope Clement VII had to flee from rebel troops in the army of the Roman Empire. When the troops did not receive their pay, he defied the fifth charge and advanced to Rome and became one of the few high-ranking people who managed to escape, thanks to the Seventh Clement secret tunnel. In the 2000 years, the Roman Catholic Church renovated the tunnels to honor the Great Jubilee year. In recent years, the Church has been opening the tunnels to visitors for a limited time every summer. Lucifer. There are those who say that the proof of the existence of Satan is hidden deep in the Vatican. These people are the same people who believe that the Vatican is hiding evidence of extraterrestrial beings and other confusing conspiracy theories. There are people who believe that the Vatican and the Pope himself are controlled by Lucifer and that they are all puppets of the devil. Of course, none of this is anything more than exaggerated conspiracy theories. The only church with the devil in it is the Hollywood Church, which was built to celebrate the defeat of Napoleon. Lucifer. The depiction of Lucifer is located inside this church in the United Kingdom, but the situation is not what you think. Artist Paul Fryer has rendered Lucifer in his work as a black figure with huge white wings attached to electrical cables. The sculpture looks quite impressive in terms of depicting the church's greatest enemy in the sacred environment where it is located. The work, made of wax, concrete, aluminum, rubber wires and feathers, perfectly captures the image of the dark-souled angel who was expelled from heaven and has a very dramatic effect. Of course, this can be described not as proof that the devil rules the Vatican, but as a disturbing work of an artist. Speaking of creepy statues of the resurrection, there is an extremely disturbing statue in the Vatican. The sculpture, made of bronze and copper by an artist named Perican Fatsina in 1977, was called Resurrection. The statue is about 20 meters long, 7 meters high, and is the background of the sixth-floor audience hall scene of the Vatican. This audience hall became the source of many complete theories in later times. And the reason for almost all of them was this terrible statue. Although the sculpture was made to depict the resurrection of Jesus, it appears to be snakes connected by some kind of demon rising from a reactive black sticky substance. The hall's head is where the Pope holds all his weekly meetings when the weather is not good enough to get up to St. Peter's Square. Believe it or not, it creates a kind of shock effect on people who see it for the first time. In addition, the statue has an important place in the hall. Because the sculptor wanted to remind all the listeners that as Christians, they should not be afraid of what will happen when Jesus is resurrected, but instead they should accept the great disaster that will happen to them and experience the joy of resurrection, even if the world is thrown into terrible chaos and a storm of death. Captive popes from 1870 to 1929, not a single pope decamped outside the Vatican. These years have become what every pope keeps his own little kingdom. It was one of the strangest times in the history of the Vatican when finally, on May 13, 1871, the guarantee law issued by the Italian government came into force. This law was an attempt to solve Italy's pope problem. The great influence and power of the Pope over the people was disturbing the government, and therefore it was intended by law that the papacy should be an ordinary subject of Italy, and not an element of sovereignty. They promised to treat the Pope with dignity, like a king. But in return he would be subject to strict Italian laws. Starting with the ninth pope, who died in 1878, the five locked themselves in the Vatican Palace and did not leave there. The Pope was so furious that he excommunicated the King of Italy and sentenced him to hell. This situation ended with the 11th Pope Pius, who made a new agreement with Benito Mussolini in 1929. In the agreement, they decided that the Vatican City should become its own country, as it still is today. The bones of Saint Peter 10 years ago, by order of Pope Francis, the 266th Bishop of Rome, the box in which they believe the bones of Saint Peter of Hanari and the first Bishop of Rome were opened for exhibition for the first time in history. This was a very big deal at the time, because before 2013, no pope had been able to say for sure that the 8 pieces of bone hidden under St. Peter's Basilica actually belonged to Azes Petros himself. Despite all these years, we still can't say for sure whether these bones belong to the Apostle Peter. In 1968, Pope Paul V said that the connection between them is realistic, but he can't give any real evidence to support the claim. December 19th, Dec.19, 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 Dec. 19, December 19th, December 19th, Dec. And when we got to 2013, the Vatican stopped being secretive and literally decided to let things take their course. To be honest, we don't know whose bones are in that old chest. Bruno Bartoloni, author of the book The Ears of the Vatican, stated that no pope allowed scientists to examine his bones. The reason is probably that they did not want to know and explain the truth. However, in 1939, archaeologists, while excavating in the caves of St. Peter's Basilica to bury Pope Pius XI, discovered a coffin with an engraving on it that says Peter here in Greek, and there were secret documents saying that there was a 1,000-year curse in St. Peter's tomb. The belief that those who open the grave will suffer the worst possible misfortune may also have influenced this decision of the popes. Death of Pope John Paul. On September 1978, Pope John Paul I died suddenly just 33 days after being elected pope. The strange thing was that there were conflicting reports about his unexpected death. Apparently there were anomalies in the death certificate, and to date no one has been able to find out exactly what happened to one of the shortest-lived popes in the history of the Church. We have many conspiracy theories, only any of which can be true. It exists. The only problem is, we can say that there is not enough evidence to say which one is true. It is one of the theories that those in charge of the Vatican Bank are extremely corrupt and are worried that Pope John Paul I will disrupt their business. According to the claim, these people killed him to keep their wealth safe. However, the said corruption has been documented and proven. We know that the head of the Vatican Institute for Religious Affairs, one of the most powerful financial institutions in the world, is up to his throat in corruption. President Psycho Paul Markin threw up and was accused of being a partner in the collapse of the Bank Ambrosiano in 1982 and losing roughly $3.5 billion. It also turned out that one of the psychopath's accomplices was the director Robert Calvi, a member of an illegal Italian Masonic lodge, who was found hanged under a bridge in London in 1982, just weeks before his corruption was made public. Although it is said that his death was a suicide, there are many conspiracy theories about it. Here, from the outside view of the Pope's death, we can deduce that the Pope was really killed to protect the bank. But in the end the scandal reached dimensions that could not be hidden. What do you think is the most frightening part of the trail?